Senior Legal Council of Scandinavian Human Rights Lawyers, which is dedicated to the promotion and protection of human rights and human dignity in Scandinavia and Europe. It has provided legal assistance in several cases regarding human rights, and they arrange lectures and conferences on topics regarding human rights, human trafficking, religious liberty, and Ruth will talk about a particular case involving Swedish midwives who conscientiously object to having to take part in abortions. Also freedom of conscience and parental rights, which is another case that Ruth is involved in too. I mean, I'd just like to add a word. I mean, like here, when you stand up and you publicly dissent from what we call a secular consensus, there's a price to be paid in Sweden also, just like there is here. And Ruth is one of the bravest people that I'm aware of, actually, just anywhere, because I would go to international conferences, and that's where I would have met Ruth and Mattias, and you become aware of what's going on in these countries, and because Ruth is involved in these high-profile legal cases, and she champions the rights of people like these midwives, she gets a lot of attacks. And so it takes a lot of courage to stand up in the face of these. So Ruth is one of the bravest people I know, and she just deserves fantastic credit and support for what she does. So Mattias is going to speak first, and after that Ruth will speak. Now, unfortunately, the screen is not displaying the PowerPoint properly, because what I'm looking at here is not coloured a little bit like that. So we just have to put up with that. I'm going to pass around some clipboards. If we don't have your name and email, you might give it to us so we can notify you of future events. So we'll pass that around as the talks are going on. So I'll hand you over to Mattias Nordstrom first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for inviting me, David Quinn. I'm very grateful for that, and thank you to Iona Institute to invite me and my wife. She is a much better speaker than me, so you wait for the good stuff later on. But we will start now with the topic on secularism in Sweden and the response from the churches, we must say, in Sweden, because there are quite a lot of churches in there. I would like to speak a little bit about this topic. Sweden is, as we know, most people know, it's a secular country, but it's a paradoxical country in some way, you could say, because still a lot of people are they are a member in the, especially in the Lutheran church. That was the state church before. Actually, it's one of the large church when it comes to members. 6.2 million people still are members of the church, even if they don't act like religious people, you would say, or Christians. So it's a little bit of a paradox all over the country. But we will come into, I will give a brief story about the history of Christianity in Sweden, and then I will speak a little bit about the topics that we face when it comes to secularism in our country, the challenges we have, but also we can see what we can do together as Christians. So the first thing we have to see that Sweden was Christianized, is later than your country. The first missionary that came to us, his name was Ansgar. He was the first organized mission to Sweden in the 9th century. And he had problems. He met the Vikings. So it took a while before Christianity came through in Sweden. We had to wait all the way to the 11th century before Christianity. And that time was Roman Catholicism that was established in Sweden. So and that was in the beginning of the 11th century. And it remained a Catholic country during the era of the Middle Age, from, you could say, from 1070 to 1527. And that is another year, we will come later on to, where the Reformation, you could say, starts in our country, and that will also change our country, in not just because of the religion, but also political. I put the 1477, the University in Uppsala. This is the most famous university in Sweden, and that's also the city where we are living. It's the Archbishop also has his seat in Sweden. And I think that it's easy to forget that the universities was actually started, most of them in Europe, by the church. And that means that when it comes to education and what we're living right now, is the inheritance of what the church started. And I think that is important to notice. Because today, maybe from the university, we see secular thoughts and ideas that's coming out there, but it started as Christian institutions. So let's move on and see what happened in the Reformation area. The Reformation was between 1527 and 1593 in Sweden, and it conformed the society where religion and the state was connected very close together. Sweden became the Lutheran country. The king became the head of the church, not the pope, and still actually the king and queen must belong to and defend the Lutheran faith by law. You see the paradox about the secular country of Sweden and its laws. You see it right there. But this is what happened, and it was going on approximately about 67 years, and 1593 there was a church council in Uppsala where it was decided that Sweden was going to become a Lutheran country. And between 1593 to the year 2000, there was the Swedish Lutheran State Church, very connected to the state with its king and with the country. But in the year of 2000, the state and the church were separated. I was speaking to friends who knows people who was working with this in the 80s and 90s, preparing the way for this to happen. They said that there was one thing that the church wanted actually, that to be separated from the church, but they forgot one thing. They said to take out the state from the church. The church came out from the state, but the state remained in the church. And that is, we're going to see what's happened for the secularism later on. During what's coming next is that we see that as all the countries in Europe, we face the Enlightenment. During the 18th century, it starts the Enlightenment and the rise of religious criticism. And of course, this comes also to Sweden. And we can see that there are two answers the church is coming up to try to answer to this criticism of Christianity during the 18th, 19th, and 20th century. And these ways are two attempts to try to meet this secular power or this secular religious criticism. And the first one is the liberal theology. That's an attempt to be relevant to the society and the need to be progressive to fit in. And I think that is something that we are challenged by in every Christian nation. We are challenged by this. We want to fit in somehow. We want to be relevant to the people around us, and of course we should be in the message we have. But what will happen, we will see later on, is that if we take away meanings of what we really believe in, what will be left then? What will be inside of what we have? The second way there was an answer to this was to call it pietism, and that is we look at our world, the Lutheran revival movement, with the emphasis on the individual experience of faith and the inner life, and rejecting many times the organized church. So we see there are two ways try to answer for secularism and religious criticism. The one is trying to be adaptive to the questions and change it because of the criticism, and the other one is you'd say, it choosing another way to see, no, we are the elected, we are Christians, this is the way we should live, this is the way we should practice. But both of them are actually leading into a way where we leave the field open for secularism. The first one is secularized inside of itself, and the other one is actually leaving the society for itself. It says, as long as we are Christians, as long as we are on the right track, we leave the rest for let it be alone. I think it's two dangerous ways because it leaves the space open for secularism. When it comes to the 20th century, which are the era of the modern secular welfare society, Sweden becomes a modern state and builds up the Swedish welfare society, which is very well known for. And we are very thankful for it as well. It's a good country to live in that way. And the state is responsible for taking care of education and social welfare and etc. And it's done a very good job in that. But in the beginning of the 20th century, the church loses influence more in the society. And it becomes, because also you could say, it's a strong criticism that is going on again in the beginning of the 20th century. And I could say that in 1951, religious freedom to leave the Lutheran State Church for all people was a law. So 1951, everyone had to be member in some kind of religious church or whatever. But if you left the Lutheran Church, you have to step into another church. But in 1951 in Sweden, so far on, you had to be a member in some church. The 20th century, the beginning, the left politicians are strong in the criticism towards Christianity. And I think this is something that we need to be reminded of. That most of the criticism and the atheists in the beginning of the 18th and 19th century and 20th century, when it comes up, they come from something that will be the left. And in the 20th century, we see from the left side, it's a strong criticism in the society against Christianity from the left. And the left is also in power, in rule of the government for many, many years and decades in Sweden. And that means it shapes the culture and it shapes the way it speaks to the church as well. During the 1950s and 1960s, there was a strong rising of secularism that maybe it wasn't just from the left, but it's also from the liberals. And the result was that Christianity was very marginalized in the public opinion. It was because there was a professor called Hedenius, and he had a friend on a newspaper, one of the most famous in Sweden, Dagens Nyheter, and those together, they were attacking the church. And they're attacking it on its dogmas. And it was a strong debate during almost a decade, but you could say the church lost. It lost in the way to defend the faith, and also lost its influence and power in this Sweden. Religion is now becoming more of a personal business with less influence on the society. And we can see it onwards from these years, from the 60s, 70s, 80s, up to the 90s in our time. To be a Christian, it's fine, but you keep it more private. It's fine to have still there are services on TV, you can see that, still there are radio programs with the mass, you can listen to that. But to be a public person and to work in the government, you don't speak up that you're a Christian. It's not just Christian values that are ruling. So that means that you can see it's a decades or an era in the 20th century where the secularists are really strong. But let's see what's happened during this modern secular welfare society and what we face today, because I think that is very important as well to lift up this day. In the 20th century, the era of the modern secular welfare society, we can see that, as I said before, the country with many benefits and a good social welfare, but also a country where mental illness increases among young people in Sweden rapidly. What is that? Well, they don't really have the answers. But we see it, and we understand that this is a problem for us. Young people doesn't feel well. What to do about it? I was on a meeting where the Archbishop of Sweden was talking, and he was speaking about secularism, and she had a very good speech about that. She said that the schools today, because they speak in religion, when we have this subject of Christianity or something, they speak about the religious people that something is odd. To pray is something that is odd, as other people do. And what have we done then, she said? She said we have taken away the existential language for people. They don't know how to handle things that are real trouble in their lives. If you don't know how to pray, but you feel very bad inside, you don't have the words to express something, what do you do then? And I think this is very interesting to see that whatever the secularist is doing is trying to make sure that people feel well. Without the existential questions answering, there will be a problem for all of us anyway. In Sweden, we see that 50% of marriages ends in divorce. That is a terrible figure, isn't it? And that is included all people that are getting married, and a lot of people that are getting married, of course, are Christian as well. 2010, 50,000 got married and 23,000 got divorced. Cohabitation is more common than marriage in our country. But here's also one more existential problem that we see in the individualistic society that secularism is trying to create. That is loneliness. Loneliness is a big existential problem in Swedish society today. And they speak about it as a real health problem for Swedes. There was a survey made for, I think it's 1 or 2 years ago, that was published in a newspaper that says that when it comes to funerals in Stockholm, the capital, it's less than 50%. In 25 years, it's less than 50% that comes to visit a funeral. They don't have time to visit the people. People are more and more alone. So, what do we face more? Well, we face a strong movement of radical feminism in our country, and queer theories that challenge traditional view of the family. We already redefined our marriage to the same-sex marriage. It's already there, and actually, first was the government, and then also the Lutheran Church redefined it as well. And you can also see that something more when it comes to education. The state is getting more hostile towards religious schools. I think Ruth will speak more about that later. And it seems that even if it doesn't have so many schools that are religious or Christian schools in Sweden, it's something that the government right now is thinking about, and some politicians said we need to stop every influence that is religious in the school. And we can see that secularism is seen as something neutral and religion as not neutral. Religion is something odd, something that is strange. And I think this is what we face. And then we see the paradox that I mentioned before, that Sweden is the second most secular country in the world. The second, the worst, if you could say that, is Japan. But Sweden is the second one. But still 6.2 million people belong to the Lutheran Church. So we have this paradox. Still people go to baptism, even if there's a decline of that. Still people are getting baptized, children. Still have people in confirmation, even if they decline that. But still we have people that want to be married in the church, but there's a decline of all these things, but they are part of the church. And we can see this as even if we have all these things that comes against to live in as a Christian in our country right now, I think there's also our opportunities. And I think that we sometimes forget about that, because every time has its challenges, but it also has its opportunities. I think that is important to see. And I think here are some of the things that we need to do. In a post-secular century, the rise of religious questions and influence, but also very aggressive secularism, is coming back. But we all actually see right now in Sweden there's a lot of things in the papers, news, even if it's an aggressive tone against Christianity, the questions are coming up again. And I think that is something good. Because if there is a silence about something, then you are ignored. But if they speak about it, there is something good in it, isn't it? Yes. It's better they speak about it, but if there is silence, we're doing something wrong. So religion is coming back in media and politics, but it's also very criticized by secular humanists. It's more the liberalists than the lefts right now who are criticizing the Christianity. So the challenges we have is to take back the public square. Because what we have seen before is that the church has left the public square. It was very criticized, it went back, but we see today that there are initiatives that comes up that wants to do something for Sweden right now. And we need a united voice in the church. We are a lot of churches, but we need to unite to speak in these questions that are for all our Christians. There's a Swedish Evangelical Alliance, for example, is a very good organization that works for these things, for the Christian values and questions in society. So we see a rise also of people that stands up and wants to do something, like we see Iona Institute here. And I think that is very, very important, to not be silent. For example, for a couple of years, we had also this Jesus manifestation in the capital of Sweden, where thousands just come together to pray and worship. And you could say, well, maybe that is more common in Ireland, but if you say in Sweden, that was quite uncommon to come together in that way, and just to come together as Christians from all different kind of churches and just to celebrate. And it's something that comes up in a agenda, it comes up in the news that we are here, the Christians are here, and our questions are important. I will end with this, because I don't have so much more time. I have 1 minute and 30 seconds more. I think the church must train its member to do something. Work for the common good. We need to understand that we have a task. It's not just about to be a Christian for ourselves. We are made to work for the common good, for everyone. And we're not withdrawn from society. And I think it's important to understand the opinion is not just one in media, but also at the coffee table, in homes, schools, working places, wherever we are. When the Christianity was fresh and the apostles went out, and in the Roman Empire, the Christianity was spread by people like you and me. They were out there living in cities, countrysides, and they were not allowed to meet and gather. There was a lot of resistance against the Christians. They have to sometimes hide to meet outside the city. But still, Christianity was spread. What was that? Well, they believed in the message, they believed in what they got, and they were speaking with people. And in that way, the Roman Empire was changed, from the bottom to the top. And I would say, I will end with this, we must believe that the Christian message and the values that once shaped Europe still can form it. And in the end, I would say, the most important thing right now is that we must equip the next generations of Christians to live out their faith in the 21st century. We have something to give, we have something to do, to work, and the time is up. I'll say thank you.